You are mostly welcome to this seminar called The Spring That Got Lost, What Happens in Yemen and Bahrain, or as Sayed suggested, The Forgotten Revolutions. Could be a better title maybe. My name is Ulf B. Andersson. I'm the editor of Amnesty Press, the magazine of Amnesty International in Sweden. And this seminar will be broadcast live on the web through Bambooser program, and also recorded so you can watch it afterwards. There will be some space for questions in the end, and so you can prepare your questions. If you want to make some twittering about this seminar, you can use the hashtag Sommartorg. And after this, there will be a very interesting seminar at 2 o'clock today about how to achieve peace in Somalia and Somalians who wants to go back and build up the country. That's 2 o'clock. And the Minister Gunilla Carlsson is one of the participants. I have a very interesting panel here today. It's Afra Nasser from Yemen. It's Syed Mohammed from Bahrain. It's Bitte Hammargren, my favorite journalist when it comes to Middle East, often writing in Svenska Dagbladet. And it's Mikael Eriksson, who is a researcher at the Swedish Defense Research Agency. And this seminar is arranged by Amnesty International in Sweden, Swedish Peace and Arbitration Society, and the Swedish Defense Research Agency. And we will talk about quite complex conflicts, and we will try to be quite pedagogic and try to explain, because as you know today, I mean, Egypt is once again in the focus of the media because of the drastic developments there. But these two countries that we are focusing on today, Yemen and Bahrain, is not so well known for the Swedish public. I will start with Afra Nasser. Can you just give a short personal background? You were active in the revolution in 2011.
Maybe I can hold it.
No,
I'm a bit short. Well, thank you first for showing up. I really appreciate it. I was in Yemen. I grew up in Yemen all my life, and I was at the Change Square protesting during the first seeds of the revolution in 2011, and it was very utopia feeling at that time till the 5 months till May 2011, when the violence erupted between the armed opposition forces and the ruling regime at that time. And I came to Sweden to participate in the Swedish Institute program because of my activism and the blogging that I was doing, and then I never went back because of the death threats for me, and it was very dangerous at that time. And since then, I started the activism from exile, and it's been like a very interesting journey. But right now, I just recently initiated the Yemeni Salon non-profit organization with a fellow of mine, Hana Al-Khamri, and we try to highlight Yemen's issues in the general political debate in Sweden, because there are a lot of diplomatic relations between Sweden. Little did anyone know about that, but there are a lot of relations between Sweden and Yemen. And recently, the Foreign Ministry of Sweden have stated that they are going to support the transitional period period in Yemen, which is I have a lot of reservations for that term. But as you see, it's really important, and I'm happy to be here and contribute in this bridge.
And the president of Yemen, Ali Saleh, he stepped down after 32 years or something like that. Were you surprised that he finally stepped down?
Well, before I talk about the situation in Yemen, I would like to highlight some of the, quickly about Egypt and the title of the seminar, The Arab Spring That Got Lost. I think that is absolutely not true. The revolution continues, and we're seeing in Egypt is very important, and I think it's very historical. And I'm very happy to be alive to witness this day. Even though it's not clear what's going on right now, I was in touch with a lot of friends and my sister who's in Cairo right now, and I was asking what's really going on. Is it a revolution or a coup? And she was jokingly saying it's co-revolution, co-revolution, something like that. So, but the revolution continues, and Egypt has a very important influence all over the Arab countries. Actually, this political or civic movements are very important for the neighboring countries. When the revolution started in Tunisia, that its influence is the one that echoed to the other Arab countries. So what's going on in Egypt also will define a lot of things in the Arab countries, and there are a lot of developments that will happen in Bahrain and Tunisia, that they are going to start their own Tamarrud movement. But when it comes to Yemen, we're in a crossroad between the unfinished justice for the revolution and the so-called transitional period, and what's going to happen in the future. So for the people who don't know much about Yemen, they just read the headlines and they think that the revolution is over. The people got what they want. They are in a better place. But to be very brief, we had a revolution in 2011 where we tried to topple a regime of 3 decades regime. And then the international community stepped in with our Muslim Brotherhood, who were the biggest, more influential opposition. They hijacked that revolution, and they planted another mini dictator who was the vice president of Saleh, the previous president, and he's the one who's leading the country with a plan given by or suggested by the Gulf Council Cooperation, the GCC deal. And Saleh was given immunity. That's our previous president. He was given immunity with a lot of his relatives who are also they had a huge role in all the grievances and the human rights violation and the lousy management of the country and the corruption that they had for the country's fortune. So he's still in Yemen, and I'm out. That's unfair.
Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah,
and he remained to be a very important and influential person till today.
Yeah. And he's still, he's still going around as a free man, and he opened an exhibition hall in Sana. Yeah. To highlight all
he's doing interviews, and the recent interview that he has done, and note, he is a war criminal. He had the interview with a very important Al Arabiya channel, a very important Arabic channel, and he was talking about the revolutions in the Arab country, and he was giving comments that the revolution were started out of the lack of democracy, and I support those revolution. And when he was asked about the revolution in Yemen, he was like, no, this is a chaos.
And despite your criticism, now you have this called National Dialogue Conference, and it has been one suggestion from the international community, supported by the Western powers and Russia also. And as I understand it, this conference is going on now, and it's still a lot of groups represented at this conference. It's the old Saleh regime, it's the opposition parties, it's women, it's young people. Is there something positive that can that will come out from this dialogue conference?
Well, part of the GCC deal was to start a dialogue between all the political spectrum in Yemen and make them be in the same place and discuss their own issues that will save Yemen's future. So the idea of the dialogue, it's not something strange for Yemen political history or even for the social structure. Tribes in Yemen sit down and they solve issues by negotiating and having a dialogue. But what's unique about this dialogue is it was driven by the international community to portray Yemen as like a very successful model when they failed in Syria, and they had a lot of setbacks in Libya as well. So the Yemen example should be like perfect and very rosy and make the country go to a safe side. But the national dialogue is really the core of it is to make as many political sides come together and come to agreement for the unsolved issues. Like it's even something that did not happen before. Even for the parliament, we did not have all of those sides in the same place. So we have the rebellion movement in the north of Yemen, Al-Houthis, where they call themselves Ansar Allah, or the loyalists of God. And we have also the south movement, where they're calling for independence from the north of Yemen. And we have the elite inside the capital of Yemen, where they are fighting over a lot of electoral and constitutional reforms and so on, and basically to exploit the fortune or what Saleh has left in the power. Around more than 500 political figures are in that national dialogue, and women, for like very outstandingly, they had 30%, where even in the parliament we only have 50% of the seats. So this is a bit promising. But what's going on inside the national dialogue is really about a lot of the international community trying to handle Yemen's issues, because it's supported or sponsored by the UN. And the UN envoy to Yemen, Jamal bin Umar, is regarded like the president of Yemen right now. So what will happen after the national dialogue, it's really unpredictable. But a lot of hopes are on that dialogue, and we will see.
Yes. Now we have to go to Bahrain and Syed Mohammed. Bahrain is a very small country in the Persian or Arabian Gulf. Just over 1 million inhabitants, and it has been run by the Al Khalifa family for many, many years. And there is no dialogue going on in Bahrain today. It's still a crackdown on the democracy movement. Can you start to explain a little about this democracy movement, how it started?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for showing up today. Actually, what's happening now, we have a dialogue, but it's a monologue, not a dialogue that's going on in Bahrain. Anyways, of course, you might not have heard much about Bahrain, so I would like to give a brief history about democracy and freedom movement in Bahrain. Bahrain has one of the longest history in democracy and freedom movement in the region. There, it started back in the 1920s. And it's been happening almost every 10 years since then. And we had one of the interesting one that we had in the 50s, which was put down by the British at the time. And then we had one in the 70s, in the 80s, and in the 90s. And in 2001, when the current king came and with his promised reforms that he's going to have, like we're going to have turn the country into a constitutional monarchy, and he introduced the national chart. and people voted for it by 98% for that. But what happened on 14 Feb 2001, he overturned on that by using this national chart, the result of voting on that national chart, and gave himself a full legislation power through the constitutions. But still, the opposition in 2002 decided to boycott the elections because his promises that he made was never delivered. So in 2001, the main opposition in Bahrain, they boycotted the election. But in 2006, the opposition decided, okay, let's try and go on trying to make changes from within the parliament, what is so-called parliament, which has no power at all. And it went on this experience of taking part in the political system in Bahrain until 2010. Again, the opposition took part in the parliament in the hope that the regime will make some real reforms in Bahrain. But it was just from worse to worse happening in Bahrain. Until the day came, which was 14 February. It was the day that when he overturned. That's why we have chosen that date. So we were as the other revolution took place in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Yemen. So that was an opportunity for us to grab the media and international community attention to Bahrain. So people were determined. They took the street in early mornings for 14 February, but soon was met with outrageous violence by the regime in Bahrain. And a number of people were were killed by the army and the security forces that Bahrain regime has imported from all over the world to support their throne. A mass demonstration took place during 14 Feb up until the Saudi troops came to Bahrain on 15th March. According to CNN, the number of people who took the street during that mass demonstration that we had during that period was 600,000, and the population of Bahrain is not more than 650,000. Yes. So as per capita, we had the biggest mass demonstration in the world, as per capita. But that was not televised in the world. So when the Saudi army came, arbitrary arrest, mass killing started. Number of that has reached up until now has reached more than 130. Number of people who've been arrested is it's almost 6,000. Number of people who have been dismissed from their jobs because they have taken part in a seminar like this, or they have been taken part in demonstration, exercising their basic rights. It has reached almost up to 6,000. That makes it for almost those who've been dismissed or arrested, 4 people in every 2,000 citizens in Bahrain, either arrested or dismissed from their jobs. And the number of kids also that been targeted has reached almost more than 240. The same goes to women. They've been targeted in Bahrain. Imagine in a Muslim country that meant to be a Muslim country in Bahrain, more than 35 mosques and worship places were targeted and demolished, under the pretext that some of them were not built on a license, and even though some of them exist even before the royal family came to Bahrain, has some historical mosque in Bahrain.
Can you? Because when the protest started in February 2011, some people claim that there was very close to an agreement between the crown prince from the royal family and the Al-Wifaq political party, which was the biggest opposition party in the parliament, and that the United States were involved in trying to get this agreement. But it never came true. Can you say something about that?
Yes. What happened was when as I said, because of the mass demonstration that took place in Bahrain, we were close to topple the regime, and at that time. So, in order to put down these mass demonstrations, the Crown Prince came with the 7 points to an agreement with the main oppositions in Bahrain. But soon, these promises was met with the intervention of the Saudi troops and the Emirati troops in Bahrain under the Peninsula Shield.
And are there any attempts today for a new dialogue or something, or is it just this crackdown going on?
Well, the protest has never stopped since 14 February. It has been going on it has been ongoing since then, even though it's not in the capital Manama, but it has been going on in the dark villages in Bahrain. There was a dialogue in 2011 that took place in July, but that came about to reduce the pressure of the international community. But who took part in that dialogue was even the expert, the expatriation, the foreign workers who work in Bahrain was involved in that. And the regime was trying to present the situation through that dialogue as if it's sectarian, as if it's a conflict between different sects in Bahrain, which was not the case in Bahrain. And as the Swedish foreign minister described that dialogue, the one that took place in 2011, it's not a dialogue but a monologue.
And can you say something about the influence from the United States? Because the United States, they have their Fifth Fleet based in Bahrain. It's very important for the U.S. So how is your opinion about the U.S. policy?
Well, I'd like to respond that with a statement that Mr. Barack Obama made in recent summit in Belfast. I quote, he said, if you choose a peaceful pathway to achieve your democracy demands and all that, we will stand side by side you. But that, in the case of Bahrain, was met by installing their Fifth Fleet in Bahrain and selling even more weapons to the regime in Bahrain during their uprising. And that was, they sold a 53 million deal weapon to the Bahrain regime in September 2011. That's how they responded to that.
But on the other hand, Obama also criticized the authorities in Bahrain for crack down on the protests.
Well, that has only been criticism and expressing concern. It has not even reached to a level of condemning this atrocity and violation that took place in Bahrain. So we haven't really seen these statements that they have been making. Well, I mean, he himself said in the United Nations Assembly that we cannot have a meaningful dialogue while part of main opposition are sitting behind the bars in Bahrain. But again, on the other hand, they are supporting the regime and providing immunity and playing PR role for the regime in Bahrain and presenting Bahrain and Yemen as an example of peaceful transition in the region in there. But not going away from that, that's in line with they don't want to upset their biggest ally in the region, which is Saudi Arabia in there. And Bahrain and Yemen is just the backyard for the Saudi Arabia, and they won't let these two revolutions succeed. So it doesn't come to so the flame does not go over their lands in Saudi Arabia.
Just let us talk for 1 minute about there are many political prisoners in Bahrain today, and this week the Cassation Court made a decision to uphold the convictions against two leaders of the Teachers Association, Mahdi Isa Mahdi Abu Deb and Jalila Al-Salman, and they were sentenced to 10 respectively 3 years imprisonment. And these two teachers, trade union leaders, they have been highlighted in some countries. Can you explain why are they convicted to these terms?
Well, I mean, and not just in the case of the teacher association, they have been charged, and they have been imprisoned because they have exercised their basic element of their rights. Because during the protest that we had in 14 February, they have called for strike, and because of that, they are being punished for that. And just talking about the judiciary system in Bahrain, just an example that happened a few days ago. In Bahrain, you blow somebody's head up deliberately and you torture someone to death in Bahrain, you get acquitted. And not only that, you get full support from the government and the prime minister, particularly the long-lasting prime minister in the world, in Bahrain. And you tweet 140 character, you can get a life sentence, you get up to 7 years in prison. But whereas you blow somebody's head up in Bahrain, you get acquitted and you get awarded for that. That's how it is in Bahrain.
Bitte Hammargren, I would like to go back in the history of Bahrain. It got its independence in 1971 from the British. Can you say something about a man called Ian Henderson? He passed away in April this year.
Yes. You mentioned that Bahrain has a colonial legacy with the British, and before the independence even, there was a security officer who had just been to Kenya. He took part in the crackdown of the Mau Mau movement in Kenya and was then posted to Bahrain. And he became the security advisor of the Khalifa family. And he was called the butcher of Bahrain, right? Yes. And he was the advisor who taught them how to persecute, mistreat, torture anybody constituting a sort of an intellectual or a political threat to the regime. So in his mindset, a person who was opposing the rule of the family was a terrorist, basically.
You are a very experienced journalist, and sometimes you happen to be on the right place in the right time. You were in Bahrain when the Saudis arrived in March 2011. Can you tell us about that?
Well, that's basically one of my most unreported events that I've been through, because this happened on the very moment when there was an earthquake and tsunami and then the nuclear crisis in Japan. You remember that? And every paper and every media outlet in the world just had wallpapers about what happened in Japan and no space for the events in Bahrain. And that's the time when the Saudi troops decided to roll in and to crack down the democracy movement. The authorities had tried to do that the previous day. I came in as there was still, Manama had been tear gassed, but the democracy movement was still holding the Pearl Roundabout. And it was very frustrating that there was no space for the small Bahraini developments. But it's so important for the whole Gulf region because all the monarchies in the region are looking upon what is happening in Bahrain. If the democracy movement had managed really to challenge the regime, there would have been repercussions in all the Gulf monarchies.
And have you been back in Bahrain after?
No, I haven't, and I think it's quite difficult to get a visa.
So because some people are saying that conflicts like Bahrain and Yemen, they are not reported so much. Is it? Can you say something more about why is it so, or?
Well, of course, I mean, Sweden is a small country, and Yemen, from the Swedish perspective, are also small countries, but they are significant in the region as such. And since there is, they're downsizing the Swedish media right now. There is fewer people to cover the regional events. So what you find now is basically parachuting of journalists to a crisis spot here and there, but you don't have that much of a continuous coverage. So this is where you get so superficial coverage.
Yes, Afra. Yeah.
Mention about Yemen. More often Yemen is regarded as a failed state. but I think we should rethink what is a state when it comes to Yemen. People live there with their own special structure. It's tribalism sometimes, but not for real, because what's happening in the revolution is it's really to revolutionize even the social structure. But when it comes to journalists, it's really hard for journalists to cover stories in Yemen, because the central government has only sovereignty in the big cities, or maybe in the capital only, and the other spots or areas are their own. They're being controlled by some other social entities, whether they are Al Qaeda, or they are the tribes, or they are just people who are like in urban and rural areas. So that's what's really difficult, and that's we hear a lot of kidnapping of foreigners in Yemen, because the central government has only little sovereignty over the whole country, and that's only in the state and the capital.
And in Bahrain, it's the regime who doesn't want to have foreign reporters coming in.
I'll just quick comment on that. Well, I mean, those journalists who've been reporting on Bahrain quite a lot from the Western countries and United States, and some of them are well known that I can't recall their names, who try to go to Bahrain. They either being denied visa, as Peter mentioned, or once they go in the country and start reporting from within the country, they get expelled immediately.
On the other hand, recently the regime decided to let Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch make very short visits, and they were allowed to visit some of the prisoners. Do you think this is an opening from the regime now, or?
Well, I mean, I think they felt sorry for letting them inside the country because of the report that they were not happy about, especially with the Human Rights Watch, that they have released on Bahrain. But again, I mean, these little things that the regime does from time and time, it's just an attempt to reduce the pressure from the international community, especially human rights organization, peace organization, that been trying to put on the regime in Bahrain to stop their violations. So it's just a propaganda attempt from the regime to reduce their pressure. It's not a serious attempt.
Should I mention also, when it comes to the situation in Yemen, a lot of the human rights NGOs are working with politicized NGOs inside the Yemen. And I quote a fellow activist, Bushra al-Maqtari, who was criticizing how the human rights NGOs, the international human rights NGOs, work with the HUD, Human Rights Watch NGO inside Yemen, who is politicized and have like a political affiliation to Al-Islah political party, and that's Yemen's semi-Muslim Brotherhood political party. So how can you really cover and document the violations even when it comes to this political party who is abusing human rights? So it's really confusing how is the relations between the international NGOs coming inside the country and trying to do their work.
Okay, let's get back to media just briefly. Al Jazeera, bitte, has been getting a lot of criticism in recent times, especially Al Jazeera Arabic broadcast. Can you say something about this criticism against Al Jazeera?
Well, Al Jazeera is seen in the region as siding with the Muslim Brotherhood movement, and you've seen now in Cairo how they actually ransacked the offices of Al Jazeera Arabic, and people in Egypt and in other Gulf countries also, those are against the Muslim Brotherhood, are also against Al Jazeera's reporting. They find it very biased. And this is something that happened over the last year, I would say. I mean, during the revolution in February 2011, Al Jazeera was seen as, standing with the popular uprising, and this has changed.
And today, is it correct to say that Al Jazeera is a tool for the Emir of Qatar?
Oh,
who is the
definitely,
owner?
because I mean they changed the head of Al Jazeera company, and it's now a member of the ruling family who's the head of the network.
Okay, Mikael Eriksson. Now we will try to put this into a regional context. We have been talking about Yemen, which is on the backyard of Saudi Arabia. We have talked about Bahrain, which has a mixed population of Shia Muslims and Sunni Muslims, and Iran has some interests. And some people are saying today that some of the conflicts, like Syria, is a proxy war between the Iranian and the Saudi Arabian interests. Can you develop on this?
I would certainly try to do so. Just let me comment on bit personal reflection. She was at the right time, you stated when you saw the Al Jazeera Shield Force, namely the GCC force coming into Bahrain. And I was at the wrong place at the wrong time because I was, prior to it, I was in the region trying to investigate the role of GCC force and what role it can play in trying to stabilize the region.
Can we just explain? Gulf Cooperation Council.
Yes, it's a regional formation in the Gulf that cooperates. It's a cooperation between various Gulf countries on issues on trade, economics.
The European Union.
It's like the European Union of the
region.
Gulf. Yes, and I'm particularly interested in the security aspect of it. I mean, what can it actually do? And my conclusion at the time was it couldn't do very much because it doesn't have any force, it doesn't have any credibility. It has some cooperation stuff, and to my very surprise, a couple of weeks later they intervened. So because I visited the institution, I was very surprised by it. Going back to your question, I think that the Middle East at the moment is a battlefield of narratives. And you reminded me of that in your introduction, Mark Ashraf, that we talk about the Arab Spring and even the title of this seminar, the Lost Arab Spring. There is a continuous debate now, and we're in a point in history where we're trying to write the narrative of the Arab revolts, the Arab Spring, and so on. For example, is the revolt or the revolution or the Arab Spring continuing, or have it died out? In Syria, is it still part of the Arab uprisings, this Arab Spring, or is it a civil war? In Egypt, we have currently the narratives on whether Egypt is still on the process of democratization, even that the military came to power yesterday, or is that a continuation of the Arab revolts in Egypt, or is it a military coup d'état? I mean, that's the question for today, I think. On another level, and that brings us to the question of Bahrain and Yemen, and that is the long-term battle of narratives between Iran and Saudi Arabia, because they have two different models, two different projects that they want to project in the region and beyond that. On the one hand, a Shia-dominated regime, a presidency that seeks kind of regional recognition. On the other hand, you have the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. You have a monarchy with Sunni preferences and so on. So that is a continuous kind of competition of narratives and projects of what is to be, to dominate the region. And add that the layer of superpower interest, and we touched upon it: oil, trade, security flows, energy, citizens, the fight against the so-called terrorism, etc. And in between, minorities are suffering and having to change their identity on a constant basis, and you also have the poor that suffers from all these kind of interests.
But the Bahraini regime, they claimed in 2011 it was Iranian infiltration behind these protests. Do you think that Iran and the Bahrain used to have also a border conflict. Do you think that the Iranians are interested in creating unrests in areas sensitive to Saudi Arabia?
That's not really a question for me to answer. That is solely within the power apparatus of these various countries. I mean, obviously, the main problem here is that they are lacking platforms for dialogues. There are a lot of conspiracy theories. There are a lot of suspicion of each other, and there's no real platform for these countries to engage. You have the Arab League. I don't know if Iran is even member of the Arab League. I guess not. No, of course not. So I mean, in the EU setting, we have a platform to discuss and solve issues, but in the Middle East, there's not that kind of regional arrangements to settle. So there is a continuous, suspicion, and people breathe from that.
Yes.
Can I just
Yes.
make a quick comment? With regard to this Shia Sunni thing, regimes in the regions have always have their pretext and ways of putting down revolutions throughout, regardless of the time. Back in the up until 1979, the current government or the regime in Iran was not the current one. It was the king. It was the Shah of Shah at the time. So, as I mentioned, that we had an uprising in the 1950s and 60s in Bahrain, but at the time it was not the regime in Iran was a pro-West and the United States. So the movement at the time in Bahrain was labeled to have Egyptian agenda. It was influenced by Egypt because at the time the president of Egypt was Jamal Abdel Nasser, was not pro-West. So the movement then was being labeled and charged with having Egyptian agenda. So these regimes have always had their pretext. I mean, what are our demands? Demanding democracy, having elected government, having equal votes, having citizenships. You're being treated based on your citizenship, not on your belonging. So these are basic elements of human rights. It's nothing to do with whether it's being influenced by Iran or Saudi Arabia. It's nothing to do with that. So it's just a pretext being used by Bahrain and other regimes, other dictator regimes.
Mikael, could you say something about the West, United States versus Bahrain? Can they influence the regime, or do they don't want to influence the regime? And the Fifth Fleet, is it important to keep this base?
It's certainly vital for as I can interpret it anyway, for U.S. Foreign policy and geopolitics in the region to maintain the fleet in the area where it is. So, and it's also, I think, in that context, we need to see the difficulties the Americans have of criticizing the regime as well. One, I mean, they can be blamed for not being more critical, but and they certainly are rightly to be criticized for specific situation in specific countries. But I think, in Washington, when they look at the Middle East, they take multiple factors into account. So criticizing Bahrain or the situation in Yemen, that is well balanced, not to disturb the security architecture that they have maintained in place for the entire Middle East. And the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain is responsible not only for the security in the Gulf states, but also in parts of Africa and beyond Middle East as well. So that is something to be kept in mind.
Short. Yes.
May I add? It's really, to put it very simply, it's really about the oil. Yemen has nothing to do with the U.S., but because of its biggest ally, which is Saudi Arabia, who refuses to have any kind of democratic movement around it, including Bahrain and Yemen and whatever. So they are wanting to protect their oil, and the main export of oil goes to the U.S. And the U.S. have also a lot of military base in the region, in the Arab Peninsula, and that's how the dynamics or mechanism that started with the Al Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula is that Al Qaeda want to take revenge for what the U.S. is doing in different parts in the Muslim world. So they started to attack those military bases. That was the Coil ship in Yemen in 2008, I think, or
before 11 September, year 2000, I think.
Yeah. That was, yeah,
But can I add, I think the Fifth Fleet is more than about control of oil. It's about the American hegemony, or the fight for the hegemony. I mean, I was actually on an American aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea outside the shores of Pakistan as a journalist covering what's happening. And from there, they were fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan. And they're using the aircraft carriers, for operations here and there. So it's more than just about the oil.
Sayed, yes. Yeah, Sayed.
Just a quick comment about the military, the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. Recently, there's been a debate, actually, in America, and there has been a recommendation by a high-ranking officer from the fleet in there, suggesting that they could possibly move the fleet from Bahrain, and that would be a big worrying for the regime in Bahrain if it happens.
Mikael, you got the final word in this discussion.
Great. No, I just want to add, beyond oil, I see also, the vital protection of Israel, the near bonds between the U.S. and Israel, logistical concerns, Bitte mentioned it, but also, let's say, the airfields in Egypt are used as transportation hubs for the fight in Afghanistan, for example, the counterterrorism and general trade flows from the Red Sea and Indian Ocean.
Okay, now I will open for questions. And Fanny has a microphone, and you are the first one. And please, questions, not long statements, and please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Martin Smedjeback. I come from Kristna Fredsrörelsen, SWE4. And I would like to ask you, if I may say it, about Swedish weapons export. During the year of the big protest in Bahrain, we had weapons go to the dictatorship of Bahrain, also to Saudi Arabia, which last year was the second biggest import of Swedish weapons. What is your what do you want to say to Swedish politicians who are in favor of this, like our Prime Minister, and also to Swedish citizens? What should we do about this? Thank you.
Yes, Sayed, that's a question to answer.
Yeah. Just in short comment to that, yes, unfortunately, Sweden has made their biggest arm deal to Bahrain and the other GCC countries in 2010. But in response to that, selling weapons to Bahrain regimes and to dictator regime is, by selling arms to them, is you providing immunity to them, and you are showing you are actually opposing the democracy movement in our country.
Mikael.
I just want to add another dimension to it also. I mean, selling weapons, it's not only about affecting the security arrangement in the region, let's say in the Gulf. It's also the other side that is not often discussed, is that it provides employment for Western companies. So that it doesn't, it's not I'm just saying that the weapons are not necessarily meant to strengthen the regime in its repressive, although it gives, I agree definitely that it gives credibility to the customer, so to speak.
I think everyone serves their own interest, and I understand that. But it's also very important to not be schizophrenic about this. When we call, like a lot of Western countries, they call themselves free and democratic, and they support human rights. And on the other hand, they sell weapons. So I think this is a bit schizophrenic, and it should be stopped.
Okay, next question. Where's the microphone? Here. Okay, over there.
Hi, my name is Edwin, and I'm from the Uppsala Association of Foreign Affairs, and I have a question for Bitte and Michael. I was just wondering about the Somalia context. How will increased insecurity in Somalia affect the conflict in Yemen? because there has been an increase in insecurity in Somalia once again.
I leave this question.
If you can answer it.
Something I cover, so I leave this to.
And I would almost turn it over to the Yemen expert, but saying that there is close ties between developments in the Horn of Africa and Yemen, and there is also personal connections. I mean, people are married to each other, and there's long historical links between the two countries. So stability in one side means probably more stability on the other side as well.
One of the aspects that I love about Sweden is that the solidarity that has a long history. Sweden has supported the democratic movement in South Africa with ending the apartheid, and now it's time also to show that to the Arab Spring. And I've met a lot of people from SIDA who who told me that there is a lot of money will be giving or allocated for supporting programs in the region, but it's really we should be very careful with whom we're going to deal with, because if you look at the situation in Yemen, as I told you, we had a revolution, but it was hijacked with the international community, and the same like people who should be behind bars right now, they're still ruling the country. The same ruling party that we went on street to try to topple, they are still leading the country, and we're still going to support the transitional period. What transitional period are we talking about? And then we want to give a lot of money to the same corrupt politician, to the same exploitation of the foreign aid. So it's I think we should rethink how the international development work should be. And
okay,
that's
now
for Sweden and for others.
Yes.
It's not to personalize it to Sweden only.
Yeah, there was some. Yes, you.
Hi, Takeshi Stoko, Radio UPF. One of the indirect consequences of the Arab Spring seems to have been the strengthening of the GCC, in the sense that it's now possibly expanding to include the other two remaining Sunni monarchies, and it has a kind of almost a final say in who becomes a democracy or who has a revolution and who doesn't. But these, as a club of monarchies, don't have seen much interest in democracy in their own field of influence. How can that really be overcome? Is there any way to overcome this growing influence of the GCC and its kind of anti-democratic leanings?
Question for Mikael.
Whoever wants it.
GCC is not a democratic institution, and it's dominated by Saudi Arabia, and it's also to Saudi Arabia a number of Gulf countries turn to look for guidance on what kind of foreign policy course there may be. I'm not so sure that the GCC has been strengthened. I know for sure that during the past 3 years, a number of monarchies in the region, all the way to Morocco, has been gaining a lot of support from the GCC, financial support, in order to tranquilize the opposition that has been active in this region. So, difficult question.
And the GCC country which has the most room for political parties is Kuwait, and the biggest opposition party, Hadas, is actually no longer in the parliament. They boycotted the last round of elections because in opposition with the ruling family. And I think what happens in Egypt now, it will also have repercussions in every single Gulf country. They're watching closely whatever political links they have.
Can I just add a question for Mikael? There is a meeting between GCC and European Union now taking place or in coming days in Bahrain. Do you think that the European Union will raise any serious concerns, or?
I have no idea. The only thing that I can, and I talked about this earlier today, if we look at the division of power in the international system, I think we are moving towards increasing regionalization. There is even a formula in the UN Charter. We talk a lot about Chapter 7, but there's Chapter 8 that calls, for regional arrangements to take care of regional conflicts. So I think in the future we are likely to see more active regional organizations taking care of various conflicts and instabilities around the world. And I think, therefore, it's very important, for example, in the case of EU, that it supports the democratic institutions, not only for GCC, but for the Arab League, that there are cooperation, African Union, ECOWAS, and so on and so forth.
Okay, we just have time for 2 more questions. You have the microphone now.
Yes, my name is Hana Al-Khamri. I'm from the Yemeni Salon. I have a question to Bahrain. You know, I mean, in international politics, a small state that lacks traditional metric of power, population, and size tend to look for allies or be member in a big council to protect their existence. And as I understood, and it happened the same in the Gulf, small Gulf state, where they actually invited the occupation to come and protect them. And in case of Bahrain, when the occupation left, they actually switched the protection to Saudi Arabia and the US. So now my question, Bahrain as a small state, when the same GCC council that actually harms the interests of its people, what alternative left for a small state?
Yes.
Yeah, just a quick comment before on the EU GCC summit has already taken place in Bahrain. It was on the 30th, and all their areas, countries of interest was on the table. That's Syria and some other countries, but Bahrain was never on the table to be discussed officially. But we just been getting statements here and there from European countries.
Aside from increasing free trade.
Well, it's business as usual. There's no human rights in that. Well, in response to your questions, yes. In the case of Bahrain, we have seen in the case of Libya, we have seen troops and other countries going in there to help people to gain power in there. But in the case of Bahrain, it's the opposite. Armies were sent across to Bahrain, and the Saudi armies and the Emirati army are still present in Bahrain to back the regime in Bahrain. And the only thing that we can do is to continue our fight for freedom and democracy, and people are much more determined to do that, and they will continue, and we will have our demands prevailed soon.
And you get the final question.
My name is Amir from Student Association of Foreign Affairs at Linköping University. The leaders of Islamic Republic of Iran used to call the Arab Spring as Islamic awakening. And my question is, how do you think, especially in Bahrain as a Shia-dominated population, these movements are inspired by, or they are willing to do some like Sharia-based government and look at Iranian model? Thank you.
The main opposition parties in Bahrain. Well, I mean, we have two oppositions in Bahrain. Some are calling for the downfall of the entire regime, and the oppositions, the political parties, are calling for constitutional monarchy. And to come up with a roadmap, the main opposition party have signed up a document. It's called the Manama document, and that document is a roadmap to achieve a peaceful, democratic transition in Bahrain. And in that, it does not say that we're going to have an Islamic Sharia law in Bahrain.
Why I call what's happening in Egypt is historic. It's because it's for the first time that Muslims are protesting against Islamization. They don't want what the Muslim Brotherhood has done to Ikhwan, to Islamize a lot of things. But of course, we don't know what will happen next with the co-revolution thing. But because we did not even expect that the downfall of Morsi will be this soon. So I think the main fruit of the Arab Spring is that the image of what an average Arab is has been demolished. It's not that they are with camels and sand and the Arabian Nights and things, and they like to be oppressed and be in an oppressive regime. But the people are not afraid any longer. People are not passive any longer. They try to do things according to what's available, and we will see what's happening in Egypt. But I of course, it's not Islamic awakening. No.
Okay, we will see. There are many developments to follow. The last time the military intervened in Egypt politics was in 1952, and they stayed for power for quite a long time at that time. So we will see, and we will see what will happen in Yemen and Bahrain. And I thank Afra and Sayed and Bitte and Mikael so very much. And it was very interesting that so many people wanted to know about these forgotten revolutions. Thank you very much.
The revolution continues.